what's your strongest argument or evidence for God's existence?
I am a big fan of the modal ontological argument, and I'll be
Interesting.
interested to hear in your critiques. I also noticed you have Oppie in your bios,
Yeah.
sort of
I'm a big Oppie
anticipating what you're
fan.
going to say. I saw. Okay, let's go.
Sure. So, just for like the audience's sake, so the modal ontological argument makes like a pretty basic claim. If God exists, then he exists necessarily. It's possible that God exists, which means that it's possible that God exists necessarily, or that there's like this possible necessity, which is God, and a possible necessity via the S5 axiom in modal logic is an actual necessity. And maybe we could think about it like this, we have all of the possible worlds, and, if God exists, then he's in all of them, and he's in one of them, which means that he must be in all of them, which means that he must be in our world. So God must exist. So I think that
Yeah.
this falls victim to the parity argument. I think that what the argument is like dying for is like some sort of symmetry breaker from the reverse modal ontological argument, which is
No.
just it's possible God doesn't exist. If God exists, then he exists necessarily. Therefore, like God does not exist.
So I think that sort of falls. Like I understand where you're coming from, but that sort of is epistemically unsymmetrical to what the S5 system sort of promotes. Because like fundamentally, it's like a possibly necessary proposition is a necessary proposition, right?
Mhm.
And that can be sort of proven by the sort of reductio ad absurdum, like contraposition of the original axiom. But to like make that like non-symmetrical move to like a sort of possibly non like a possibly necessary non-existent being, that requires a sort of different, that like is a, that alters what S5 is trying to illustrate by it's sort of, it's a false dichotomy. It doesn't make the same argument that S5 is proposing. I don't know if I've explained that particularly well, but
Um, yeah, I mean, I disagree, right? So think about it this
okay,
way. If God exists, then he's in all possible worlds.
sure.
So there's one possible world where he isn't, therefore he doesn't exist. It's you could do like a modus tollens. God exists
Mm,
implies exists in all possible worlds, doesn't
yeah.
exist in all possible worlds. That is, it's possible he doesn't exist, therefore he doesn't exist.
Sure, but there's a distinction between it's possible that God is not necessary and it's possible that God is necessarily non-existent, right? Those, that sort of equivocates two distinct modal claims.
So maybe there's like a bit of confusion here. My claim is just that we can infer from the possibility that God doesn't exist to the conclusion that he doesn't exist.
Sorry, can you reiterate that? I'm breaking up on
Yeah.
my end.
So maybe we'd say like premise one: if God exists, then he exists necessarily. That is to say, like he exists in all possible worlds. Um,
Sure.
there's a possible world where God doesn't exist. Therefore, God doesn't exist by modus tollens. A implies B, not B, therefore not A.
Premise two, I think, is invalidated by the fact that the definition of the MGB entails necessary existence. So if you grant that, you can't then sort of propose a world, sort of via possible world semantics, because via S5 they're all symmetrical and reflexive. You can't propose that there is a possible world in which God does not exist if you
Why
grant the
not?
existence of the MGB, because but it's a sort of internal critique, right? You have to ascertain the existence of an MGB
What do you
to
mean
then propose that
MGB?
critique. Like maximally great being, it's the acronym that
Yeah.
Plantinga
No,
uses.
so okay, wait. So the claim of the modal ontological argument is that if it's possible for God to exist, then he must exist. But then you can run a parity argument of this, which just says if it's possible for him to not exist, then he must not exist. So, and anything that you use to justify like the first premise that it's possible for him to exist, we could equally use to justify the first premise of the reverse argument, which is that it's possible for him to not exist.
And Plantinga acknowledges that. So like he acknowledges that a rational person can either believe in the modal ontological argument or not, and the only difference is whether you sort of accept the first premise. So I'm not going to sort of persist down that. I was just
Mhm.
interested to hear
Yep,
your take. Um, the sort of second thing I just wanted to propose, more modal ontology,
sure.
is what do you think about the sort of I forget who proposed it, but the perfect island critique.
Uh that's that sure. Uh I don't know. I think it's like all right. I don't think the Anselm argument is very good. I think obviously the modal ontological argument
Yeah,
is like way better.
yeah.
But I think I don't know. I feel like I'm inclined to. I haven't heard like an Anselm argument in quite some time. Um, I don't know. I don't have strong feelings about it. In terms of like the island critique, I probably like I think I've used it before. Do you have like a critique of the island critique? I'm sorry, wait, let me break this all down for the audience. So, okay. There's like an ontological argument that came like way earlier from a guy named Saint Anselm. He just says like if, imagine like a maximally great being, well, this being would need to exist because, that's better than it not existing. So if it's like maximally great, then it would need to exist. A maximally great being that doesn't exist wouldn't be a maximally great being. So it needs to exist. And then there's like a parody argument that was written by like a contemporary of Anselm, like somebody who lived at the exact same time, who like mocked it and said, well, if there's a maximally great island, then it must exist because, it would be better if it existed than if it didn't exist. So the maximally great island must exist. So yeah, I guess like yeah, what's your critique of it?
Well, I think there can be no such thing as a necessary island. And an island is inherently contingent on things like matter, the universe's existence. I just don't think that sort of falls, again, sort of symmetrical to the original argument. I'm not a particularly strong proponent of Anselm. I was just interested to see if you would
Sure.
take a position on defending it.
Sure. And when you say like contingent, do you mean like it's like ontologically dependent, or do you mean like the modal definition of contingent, which is just like it exists in like some possible world, but not all possible worlds?
No, it's sort of more like in the sort of cosmological sense, like we can't have infinite causal regress, so thus there must be a necessary sort of being. That's the original grounding for the Calum and the Leibniz sort of contingency arguments.
Oh,
And
that's
so
interesting.
I'm sort of applying that in this situation in the sense that we can't like even in Anselm's original argument, right? The God he's proposing must be necessary, and an island just doesn't like an island just can't be necessary. It's contingent on so many different things.
That's very interesting. I'm familiar with like a critique of this. One sec, let me find my doc. I wrote this out in Google Docs like several months ago.
I'm
But
interested.
there's like a critique by a guy named Everett, um, and it argues from the premise that contingency is not a great making property, which it seems like you'd be committed to in this response. To therefore, like God wouldn't create the universe. And the argument's like basically this. So to the act of creating the universe would bring in like an imperfect object that if God exists alone, then all of reality is perfect, right? Like it can't be made better. It's literally perfect. The only thing in it is perfect. But then if you bring in a universe, then it's imperfect because contingency is imperfect. So,
Sort of take the reverse of that, that would lead to modal collapse. I.e., like if God's will is necessary, so and God's will is like it's like the panpsychist view that consciousness is in everything.
yeah,
If ever that if we take that view, then that leads to modal collapse. So I'm not sure if that can necessarily be applied here. I sort of think the distinction I'm trying to make here is that like there is in Anselm's original argument, which I'm not a particularly strong proponent for. So I'm
yeah,
actually going to shift this to the sort of modal ontological version, right?
sure.
I was sort of seeing if you would stand on the perfect island as a critique of the modal version, and
I'm
I just
probably
do
undecided. A
okay, go
critique of
on.
the modal version? No, I think the
Yes,
proper critique of the modal version is the symmetry argument.
yeah, and as I've already said, I have no reason to push that
Have
further,
you
even planting to
you sound like you're very well read. You're familiar with like Majesty of Reason, right?
not in any great depth, but sort of
He has a great video where he goes over like I think you would actually love this video. It's let me find the exact title of it, but he goes through the modal ontological argument and then he gives like lots of like possible symmetry breakers that people have given like a reason to think that either it or specifically he just goes through reasons to think that it's possible for God to exist. And there are some interesting ones, right? Like one of them is like, it would be good. Ought implies can, like ought implies possibility. Uh, Therefore, like it must be possible for God to exist insofar as it would be good for him to exist. That's like an example of like a symmetry breaker for why it's possible for God to exist. And then he just like gives like throw responses to like a bunch of different symmetry breakers. So that might be like good in terms of like you might be interested in that. to the extent that
Um,
it could give you like some ideas for symmetry breakers.
for that. I think sort of the next proposition I'd want to raise is, are you familiar with naturalism as a concept?
Yeah.
Cool. So, what do you think about Plantinga's evolutionary argument against naturalism? Because I'm assuming you're a proponent of naturalism as a worldview.
Yeah, I am. I think proper functionalism, like the proper functionalist framework that it operates under, leaves God with all of his beliefs being unwarranted.
But come again? I can hear that.
Yeah, so okay, so what underlies like the evolutionary argument against naturalism is the idea of proper functionalism, that your beliefs have warrant only
Mhm.
if they're like working as they were designed to function. Now that means that none of God's beliefs has warrant, so he just couldn't be an all-knowing being.
More to the sort of my understanding of the Ian is that it's implausible to hold both naturalism and like to accept evolution as a premise, which I think I would be I'd be inclined to accept evolution. I think
Mhm.
there's too much scientific evidence to doubt it.
Yeah, of course.
But then, if you then take naturalism as you take naturalism to be true as well, there is then not sufficient selection pressure on like our cognitive abilities to be truth seeking,
Why not?
because truth seeking mechanisms are not correlated to survival in the same way that sort of evolution selects for fitness seeking
So
mechanisms.
yeah,
It's like Plantinga's tiger
mhm.
experiment.
No, sorry, go for
There's
it.
like, um, are you familiar with the sort of tiger thought experiment?
I think maybe is it the idea that like you can't tell if it's like a tiger coming at you or it's like a piece of driftwood?
Yeah, that's sort of that's one of them. I probably should be more specific. It's so imagine like when in the context of developing a species, the action of okay, tigers are gods, and the best way to appease our gods is by running away really, really fast. And also the sort of truth-seeking mechanism that tigers are dangerous. The best way to survive is running away really, really fast. That like the underlying belief doesn't necessarily correlate with sort of fitness-seeking action that evolution selects for.
Yeah, no, I hear that. So I think that there's like kind of something to say, which is just that like clearly like evolutionary like cognitive biases are definitely present in our cognition. Like that's obviously true, right? We have like things like confirmation bias, recency bias, like we have all of these cognitive biases. Like a great book on this is fuck, what is it? Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. But just get like surveys our biases, and it lays out this like model of human cognition where we have like a really quick like system one where we will make inferences like really quickly, but it'll be riddled with biases. We'll use shortcuts, we'll use heuristics, and we'll arrive at conclusions really quickly, like without thinking even. Yeah, you know, and the biases by which we arrive at these are ones that are good evolutionarily speaking. There's an evolutionary reason for all of the biases that we have. But then there's a system too that is able to overcome those biases, that is truth seeking. And that makes sense, right? Like it makes sense that evolutionarily you should be able to make instant snap judgments and then when you're safe, like go back and revise them. So I think that there is like good reason to think that we would be truth seeking insofar as like the truth of reality is quite important in terms of like your survival and reproduction.
The point is that it's not that truth seeking mechanisms aren't like couldn't possibly be useful to what evolution selects. But I think the point that Plantinga makes is that there is no necessary correlation between that. And if you even have so much sort of any doubt on the selection pressure to trust your cognitive reasoning, then holding evolution and naturalism together means that there is even some sort of slight doubt over the cognitive reasoning that led you to determining that evolution and naturalism were true. So thus it's not that it's that it couldn't possibly be plausible. It's more that there is no necessary like correlation between them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess this argument is getting like I don't think I'm convinced that this is like a valid argument or that it follows a valid inference rule. Because it totally seems like it could be the case that like I agree, like it's possible that I'm like a brain in a vat or that there's like
Mhm.
something going on But of course, like I just have no justification for thinking that sort of thing, and I'm not sure why evolution would give me some sort of justification. Like it seems like another, well, it's possible that you evolved to not grasp at truth. So therefore, it's the case that, or like all of your beliefs are like unjustified. I don't think like a possible defeater is an actual defeater. So, I'm not really sure what the thrust of the argument is,
I
insofar
was
as I
more
think
just
it's like totally plausible that evolution would select, for like, it seems plausible that evolution would select for this.
again, it's one of those arguments I'm more just interested to hear what you think. Sort of next, I'm done with that as long as you
Sure,
are.
that's fine. Yeah.
Cool. Cosmological argument for God's existence.
Which one?
Um, we can go Caleb just for
Oh, sure.
simplicity.
Yeah,
Um, so I understand that you're an Oppie fan.
I
So
am.
I'm going to deduce from that you don't think infinite causal regress is impossible.
I'm actually more than an Oppie fan. I'm a Dr. Blitz fan, which is why I think infinite causal regress is possible. I actually don't know. I'm unconvinced by all of the infinity paradoxes or all the arguments against causal regress. Like I like the idea of like the a necessary initial state, but I think there's like really good evidence for big bounce, big crunch, which could very well be an infinite regress. I also hold to the B theory of time, if you're familiar with that, which gets out of like all of the infinity paradoxes really easily.
Could you just sort of expand on that quickly? I'm not super
Yeah, on
familiar
B
with
theory of
theories of
time.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, so B theory of time just states that all moments are equally real. Spatial analogy is really helpful. So 10 miles away from me exists. It's just 10 miles away from me. 10 minutes from
Sure.
now exists. It's just 10 minutes from now. It actually exists. It's just 10 minutes from now. And like 10 miles away from me actually exists. It's just 10 miles away from me from now. So the B theory of time just states that all moments are equally real. Uh,
Sure.
so if all moments are equally real, questions like, well, how did we get to here? Well, the here always existed. It just existed at this specific like temporal location.
Okay, interesting. So I'm going to assume that you also don't hold to a sort of determinist point of view. We
I'm
don't.
inclined towards necessitarianism.
Going back to the sort of Calem argument then. So would you assert that brute facts are sort of plausible in their existence?
I don't like brute facts, but I'm agnostic to whether they exist. Like I think you should try to avoid them if possible.
Or do you would you validate the principle of sufficient reason?
Which version?
Let's go with Leibniz.
So is that like just the every contingency has an explanation?
Pretty much, yeah.
I don't gosh, I don't really believe in contingencies. I think necessary things produce necessary things.
Interesting. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, the modal collapse argument is like a good illustration of this. But so let's say that you have event A, and event A necessitates event B, and event A is necessary. Well, then so is event B. There's no possible world where event B doesn't happen. If event A is necessary and event A is bringing about event B, like
Yeah.
the causal connection there, like the laws of nature or whatever are
Is
necessary,
necessary. Fine.
then event B is necessary too. There's no other outcome that could be.
And thus that leads to modal collapse. Fine.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's difficult. So your sort of I'm just gonna summarize your sort of critique of the Calem argument is that it stands on the principle that we must avoid infinite causal regress. And because you invalidate that proposition, the sort of conclusion drawn from Calem is irrelevant.
Uh, I'm not sure if I'm tracking. Like I don't think the universe began to exist.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I think that
So
an infinite regress is totally coherent.
what in the sense you don't believe the Big Bang was the beginning of our universe?
Yeah, like the Big Bang definitely happened, right? It was the rapid expansion. I have no reason to
Yeah.
think that it was like point zero. And actually, the if you're familiar with Phil Halper, he was in like the Alex O'Connor debate against like Cliff and Stewart. He's also like a like like a well-respected like physics and
Yeah.
philosophy guy. He did a recent survey of physicists, and the majority opinion is that the Big Bang says literally nothing about being the beginning of time or the beginning of the universe. That all it is just that the universe was in a hot dense state and then it rapidly expanded.
Any sort of empirical evidence demonstrating otherwise. There is no sort of compelling piece of evidence to illustrate that time, in the sense that we understand it, extended before the Big Bang.
Yeah, and likewise, like the opposite. Like there's no reason to think that it wasn't before. The
That's true.
the consensus opinion, I should clarify this. It's not that the Big Bang is not the beginning. It's just that the Big Bang makes no claims to being the beginning. That the Big Bang
Got
is a theory which is agnostic to whether or not there was a beginning of these things.
Okay. Do you not think that sort of infinite causal regress violates nihilo ex nihilo? Or like
Uh,
nothing comes from nothing?
I'm not sure why it would.
Because in the sense that we can't have an infinite chain of like contingent events, right?
I'm a necessitarian again. I don't think
Oh,
contingencies exist.
right. Okay. I'm again. That's sort of a premise that we just would fundamentally disagree on. So I think it'd be
Mhm.
difficult to come to any sort of conclusions drawn from that.
If you don't like brute
I
facts, the alternative, if you reject like the argument that I put forward, the alternative is that you'd be committed to brute facts. Right. So if you have like event A and event A is necessary, and then like it causing event B, like the causal connection is necessary, then event B is necessary. The only other alternative is that like event A is a contingency, but it would need to be like sorry, at the start of the chain of contingencies, there would need to be a brute contingency because it couldn't come from like a necessary thing because necessary things only produce necessary things.
Position A was a necessary proposition, and proposition B was contingent on proposition A. Regardless of the causal connection, proposition B is still contingent on proposition A, and thus is
Oh,
not a necessary
sorry.
proposition.
Gosh, this is I'm so sorry. Wait. This is a good point of clarification. But when I say contingent, when I say I don't believe in contingencies, I'm saying I think that everything is either necessary or impossible. I don't think that there's anything that exists in some possible world but not others. I'm not using it like the ontological dependence
Yeah, yeah,
sense.
yeah. Okay. I was sorry. That was my misinterpretation of what you were saying.
That's all good.
Um, I'm afraid I have to go, but this was really
That's totally
enjoyable.
fine.
Thank you very much.
I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much. You're clearly very well
Thank,
read, and I really appreciate the conversation. It's nice to be able to talk to people who have like clearly spent some time like reading and looking into this.
yeah, I watched your last debate. That was quite something.
Yeah, it really was. I'm sorry that you had to sit through that, but anyway,
Have
um,
a good rest of your day or night.
yeah, you as well.
Thank you.
That guy was super cool. Um, I'm of course like a big fan of people. I actually can't believe that that call was only 20 minutes. That call felt like it lasted like an hour or something. I guess time really flies. Um, anyway, I guess or the opposite. I don't know. We just covered so much ground. It was pretty cool.